Welcome to Nintendo Ninja News. It's the NNN show where we talk about life and things like that. And I believe um, our last episode was a little while ago. So um, we were talking about Pokemon before and stuff like that. But uh, an interesting topic came up on one of our our friends, the Nintendo Guru, talking about should the Nintendo Switch be separated? Should they sell it without the dock? Now, this is a bit of a strange conversation to have 5 months before a release of the console because we have no idea how it's going to sell. So this is sort of preempting the idea that the console's going to fail or it needs to be even cheaper. Now, Nintendo's marketing it as a home console that you take on the go, but in reality, it's a handheld that you connect to the TV because all the hardware is inside the handheld tablet, whatever you like to call it. So that's sort of where my thinking is with that. And this sort of conversation about separating it from the dock reminds me of people when the Wii U was failing to remove the gamepad and make the console cheaper. For some reason, people thought we just make it cheaper, more people would buy it. And of course, I have the gamepad here. This thing costs probably a fair bit of money, probably about $100. So it might have made a difference in sales, but it was confusing. Even the Wii U launch trailer showed off the gamepad and the Wii remotes and the balance board and things like that. And it was a little bit confusing because it did come across as some sort of add-on for the Wii. And that was the confusing message from it. With the Switch launch trailer, it was pretty straightforward and people got the message and people were pretty positive. My opinion is that it should not be separated and that the dock itself is it's it's probably fairly cheap to make and it's probably something like $30. I couldn't see the dock being even $50. It's just something that probably has something to charge it and to dock it and maybe a little bit of an air vent there somewhere, but that's about it. It should be really cheap for them to make because all the product and money is going into the handheld that's got the CPU, the RAM, the battery life and things like that. So I think it's really too early to be talking about stuff like that. For people who, and I remembered also too, part of the conversation with Nintendo Guru was, I have a few, family members and kids like that who want to buy multiple consoles, and I don't want to have 3 or 4 docks. I think in that situation, it's just too bad. Because this thing is virtually as a handheld. It's an overpowered handheld that can pretty much work as a home console. And the cost will have to be less than a home console, but a bit more than a handheld. And here in Australia, the Wii U sells for $430 and the new 3DS XL sells for $250. So maybe around the $350 to $400 mark may be the cost. Now, some people will complain that, that's a very expensive handheld to get, and it is. But with the amount of games that you can get, or have Pokemon and all that sort of stuff, it should be worth it in some ways. And if you need to get multiple of consoles for children and things like that, you do have the joy sticks that the little things that you can take off and they can do 2 player together. So it's not like you really have to buy a second one for little kids and that. They can play Mario Kart and Pokemon and things like that and take turns. But I think it's just, if you need to buy multiple ones, then you will probably have to get it with the dock. Because if you sell it without the dock, then what do you call it? It's not a Nintendo Switch anymore. It's like a Nintendo non-Switch because you're not switching between the home console and that. And I would bet you bottom dollar if you sold separate packages, one with the dock and one without, There will be parents coming into gaming stores going, I bought this thing called a Nintendo Switch, and I tried to plug it into my TV, and it didn't work. What's going on? And then for the 100th time, to explain to parents and to people, they'll say, oh, well, you bought the Nintendo Switch that didn't come with the dock. The cheaper version, you should have gotten the more expensive one. So it creates a brand confusion, because without the dock, it's not a Nintendo Switch. It's just a handheld. So that's another part of the reason why I think Nintendo doesn't want to do that. And I think it's fairly early to be talking about, this is sort of in the areas of, well, the Switch is failing, what do we do? And it's very similar to the talk about the Wii U, in terms of, let's remove the gamepad and put a traditional controller in, and that will make it work. But the same thing too, if you remove the gamepad from the Wii U, it took away its unique feature, and it would just even be more obvious that it was an underpowered console. So I think that's the hard part about it. So yeah, I guess that's my thoughts on the topic. And I thought it was interesting in terms of the fact it was even talked about. Because I didn't... it's just way too early. This thing's coming out in March, and Nintendo Guru are not the only ones who've suggested this idea. Try to make this as cheap as possible. But I think it takes away the whole meaning of what the Nintendo Switch is all about. It's a bit like buying a car without tires. It'll be cheaper, but you weren't able to run it really well. Or, getting a PS4 without the controller. It'll be cheaper, but you get what I mean. Like, let's just keep the Nintendo Switch as it is with the dock, so the name actually makes sense to people. So maybe we'll have this conversation in 2 years' time, if sales are not working out. But it's way too early to be talking about this, and it's a bit of a pessimistic sort of view, because we don't know what the price is at all. We don't know what launch games will be there. So really, we're speculating on top of speculations and making assumptions that the console needs to be cheaper than the price that we don't actually know about. Does that make any sense? So, it gets to a point where we're making assumptions off rumors and no knowledge. So that's where these sort of subjects that people talk about ends up being a little bit pointless. But I think the things that we can talk about the Switch is what potential launch games are coming out and what would be a good price point. I'm thinking $350 for the Switch for Australian dollars, and that would be somewhere around the $250 mark for America. I think $299 would be fairly pushing it. I think $200 might be a little too cheap. So that's my thinking about it. So, but apart from that topic, things are doing well. You may have noticed that I do have a middle bookcase. It's a little new, isn't it? So I thought, because I used to do TV stuff there, and I'm not too keen on that anymore. Just mainly for reasons for, I didn't really want to deal with that sort of stuff and things like that. So, that's okay, and that's cool. And sorry, my brain's going off. But I sort of have the PS4 and the Wii U here at the moment, playing them via the PC monitor, which is a bit strange, but I like the setup for now, and I'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's the topic for this week, and that's it from me. So I shall see you next time. Bye.